Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Now, I was asked to talk about child study, so I will. I promise I will. Also, I'm keen to get your questions and responses, because child study is one of those very special, important things we do in a Waldorf school, and the way we do it is quite unique. It's different from perhaps other, what could be called case studies in both in education, even in medicine. When they do rounds in hospitals, they look at children and they understand them individually. And so what I'd like to do is just give you a perspective on what child study is, a little bit of my experience about it, some broad ways of going about it, and then obviously keen to get some questions and discussion, and also hear your experiences. So very keen. There are so many different ways to do it. So what I'd like to start off with is more a general perspective, and then we will open it up into a bigger conversation. So first thing is, when we plan our lessons and we plan curriculum, and we've just started, don't we? I don't want you to feel. So jangan malu. So first of all, one of the first things Rudolf Steiner said in the very first course to teachers, in the book that's called Discussions with Teachers, which was the very first day that he spoke with the teachers. The very first training day, the afternoon session, you had 3 sessions each day, and each of those became a book or a lecture course. And the third one, called Discussions with Teachers, is more of a Q&A with him. The very first thing he says is, we have to get used to dealing with the diversity of students. The diversity of students. In other words, every student is unique, and every student has unique issues, and we need to understand their unique situation. Now, this in itself was quite new in education, really, because so much of regular education in Steiner's time was just about bringing a curriculum, and then teacher would tell the curriculum, students would then be examined on if they knew it and get a mark, and that's all education was. Now, Steiner was bringing a whole new impulse, very much ahead of its time, and also really what so much of a lot of even mainstream education today are trying to understand: how does the student learn, and how can we really help each student become the best themselves? So he was really bringing in a whole new way of educating. And so the child study is one aspect of that. Now, and as teachers, we can be so focused on the curriculum and knowing all the things I have to teach, all these great main lessons and everything I'm talking about. But at the same time, we always have to focus on who is the child receiving all this. So I bring this great big picture of my curriculum, but it has to work for each child. And I'm educating that child. So I have to work with that individual child. So I need to understand them. And not only that, I really need to understand not just how well they're learning my material, but how I can help them really unfold their life on earth, how they can unfold their destiny. Now, we're made up of many complex layers as a human being, and sometimes those layers can become a little bit challenging, and we cannot present who we really are. And the child study is really trying to unlock, in a sense, the secret of each child. So we really understand each child's story and what they're here to do, and how I, as a teacher, can help them do that. So it's the first part of child study is just the way we even think about understanding each child. That each child is a riddle. Each child is like a secret, a riddle. They present something to us, and we have to almost solve that riddle. We have to learn the secret almost. Who is this child? And the child study method is a way of trying to unlock that secret, to unlock that riddle, to really go deeper. And that's why it's called child study. You're really trying to study the child. It's not just see the child or assess what they know or test them. It's for me to really study the child and to really deeply understand what is happening inside the child. Now, what I'm going to talk about, the child study, is something we do together as a faculty. And that's one of the key aspects of it. It's done together. But there is a first step that every teacher should do, and this is part of your practice, your work as a Waldorf teacher. And it's also something that it's not just a duty to do, but it's something that helps you become a better teacher. And this is your own quiet, personal study of each child. And if you have a class, so if you're a main lesson teacher and you take one class and you take them through the primary school, you see them every day, then in one sense it's fairly easy for you to spend a little bit of time every day just thinking about each child. Now, this is part of your daily practice to do this. But it's not just as the main lesson teacher, but as any teacher teaching anything. If you can spend a short amount of time each day just thinking about each one of your students, I can assure you, you become a better teacher and you make a better relationship with them. Now, all it takes, and it's very simple, and this is something that Rudolf Steiner suggested and I've found works so easily in practice. You know, so much of our relationships are around focusing on another person. If we are relating to someone, so much depends on how we focus on that person, how we attend to that person, how we think about that person. And Rudolf Steiner suggested that if we want to strengthen our relationships with other people, a way to help that is each day to quietly, in our own minds, make a picture of that other person. Just in my own mind, just make a little picture, a mental picture. Imagine that person. Separate from my relating to them or talking to them, but each day just to make a little picture of that person for a very short time. It could need only be 10 or 15 seconds, but just in those few moments to focus deeply on that person and make a rich imagination, a rich picture of that person. And if you do this regularly, every day, something special happens. You start to build these unconscious connections with that person. Steiner talked about it as the underground wires. Like wires, you know, he was using an old, Steiner was pre-Wi-Fi, you know, it was still wired. So he was saying you build these underground wires to another person. We'd now say you're on the same Wi-Fi network with the other person. And he suggested that if you just spend a little bit of time every day picturing the other person, something starts to happen that is beyond the material. It's not material. You start to deepen your connection with them. Now this goes for all connections, all relationships, but especially works for a teacher. And his suggestion, and what I've found works very much in practice, is if you every day as a teacher just spend, and it only takes 5 minutes, but if every day you spend between 10 and 20 seconds is all it needs, making a mental picture in your mind of each of your students. So if you've got 20 students, just taking 5 minutes quietly every day, usually do it at night when you're preparing your lessons, and just quietly go through your class and just imagine, make a picture of each one and hold it for 10 to 20 seconds. And just take your class and imagine them in a circle and just go around each one and 10 to 20 seconds make that picture and concentrate on them, and then move from that one to the next one and then the next one. And class of 20 students, 10 seconds each, it's 200 seconds, that's less than 5 minutes. If you really want to spend a lot of time, spend 15 seconds, then you really are at 5 minutes, and that's all it takes. But the main thing is to do it every day in a regular way, and often it helps if you do it at the same time each night. You get into a routine, and every night, say you do your preparation at 9 o'clock at night, you put the families all fed, all in bed, looked after themselves, you have your preparation time, and you spend those five minutes just thinking of each child. Now in those moments, you have to concentrate hard on them and just focus. It's the power of concentration. And if you can focus totally on each child for those 10 seconds, make the picture, and then let that dissolve and move on to the next one. I always do it in the same order of the class. I usually memorize the role of the class in alphabetical order and just go around every day the same order. Now, what this does is it stimulates your own unconscious, your own inner mind, and you take them into sleep. And as we know in our work in sleep, our consciousness is this rhythmical kind of, it's a bit like a form drawing, a consciousness. We're here during the day, and at night time we go to sleep, and we go up into unconsciousness, and then during the day we're down here, and we do all the sort of earthly things, the daily things, and then at night we go up here, and then we come down in the day. And our life, and this is the night, and in the night, so in the day, this is us down here, this is us now. Nighttime, we take all of these experiences and we go up into the night. We go into our, we call unconscious. And in our unconscious, we sort all this out. And we start to make connections. And if you do it every day in a regular routine, you start to use the night to get ideas. And it's a creative source of ideas, things to do. And you start to use this as a source, and so you start to get creative ideas. Like new ideas come to you. New insights and new ideas. If you use the night to inspire your day. Now you of course think just as per normal, you do all the normal things you do during the day, but you start to use this other part of life. And this is a wonderful thing. If you just have a very materialistic view of life, you think that this is all that counts. So a materialistic view of life thinks that this is all that counts, just this. But really, you think of a whole day, we spend 8 hours is a healthy sleep time. So 8 hours out of 24. So a third of our life is spent up here. third of our life. That's a lot. Huge amount, right? And so a materialistic view of life is that's you're only alive for 2/3. The rest is you're just regenerating, you know. You put the car in the clinic and it's being fixed up and then you come back fresh. But if you use this becomes a whole picture of your own life, and you start to use this other realm. And this is where our thoughts go. And our thoughts work here. And the key question is what we think about down here. When our thoughts down here, if we take them up here to the night, they kind of get refreshed and ordered, and they come back to us in a better state, in a fresher state. Now sometimes you will have had this experience when you've had a big problem that you couldn't solve, and you've thought about it, gone to sleep. Next morning, or 2 mornings later, you wake up, there's my answer. This is what I should do. So we often have this. And what we try to do as Waldorf teachers is use this as a regular source of creative ideas. Now, when you do your study of the child, when you do your own little private meditation on the child, you are taking those thoughts into your sleep, and it's often then you get ideas of what you should do for that child in your class. So I might think very closely on that child just for 10 seconds, and I try not to think about the kind of daily problems. If I think about a child, I might think, I think about, I take one child in my last class, I think of Mia, and I think, gosh, she left her sand shoes at school, and I've got to take her sand shoes back to her mum, so she'll have her sand shoes for playing basketball tomorrow afternoon. And I think about those ordinary things. Now you try to avoid that. I just try and think of the child. Just making a picture. An extraordinary thing is, that's when the ideas start to come. Now this is what I call the individual teacher's child study. So you work with that. Every teacher should be thinking about each of the children in their class. So it should be a normal thing for you to be really trying to be unlocking the secrets of each child. And each child comes to us with almost a question, almost an issue. And our task as teachers is to say, how can I help this child really become the person they're destined to be, the person they're meant to be? And that's not just, are they going to become an engineer or a doctor or something? It's more the actual person, how can they manifest all their gifts and live a happy life on earth? That's my question. So when we focus on this, our thoughts go up here, and then they often come back down as creative ideas. So that's a regular task that as a teacher we can be doing every day. And I can assure you, if you do that, it really builds what I call an inner unity in your classroom. Your thoughts are actually part of the classroom. Your thoughts, what's in your mind, helps with classroom management. How you think about the children. And every day, holding the class, it's almost as though you're holding them. So during the day, you're holding them in the classroom. At night time up here, you're holding them in your thoughts. So it's an extra layer. You're holding them together. So it gives this, what I call inner unity to the class, in your thoughts. Now this is the part of thinking. Our thinking is actually part of the educational process. And this is the first thing Rudolf Steiner talked about to the teachers, was what lives inside you is part of the education. So this is the first aspect of child study, is what we do as individual teachers. So that's like the foundation. Now the child study that we do as a faculty is really another step. It's another level. if I can just write this down. No, this is the. So, you see you here. She was my great helper. She was my great helper in that other year. But I'll do it myself. I've learned from her how to do it well.
No,
it's all good. In another one? Yeah. That's fine. That's good. No, it's all good. Thank you anyway. So we're all good. No. All right, so that's the first child study, is the teacher's individual child study. So we call that the individual child study, what you do as an individual. Now the second one is, so this is for individual teacher. Now the second one is really what we call the faculty child study. And this is where faculty child study, in one sense it's the same process, but it's more focused on one child, where numbers of faculty together think about and study the child. And just as the individual thoughts can have an effect on the child, so too can the collective thought, the group thought, the faculty thought, can have an even more powerful effect, because we're doing it together. We say we multiply the effect. So the whole premise is really two things. We want to really personally understand the child and learn about the child. And secondly, we want our thoughts to work down on the child. So this is the idea behind the child study, is working together. Now, first of all, if I'm studying a child in my class, in my mind I assemble the picture and I make the picture. But when we do the faculty child study, we need to share a common picture of the child. So to do that, we need a common language, a common way of assembling the information together. In other words, we need like a procedure. We need to have a set series of steps that we do in understanding the child. Now, in different schools, over all the years that Waldorf schools have been going around the world, there are many different procedures. So I'm just going to share the one that I've found useful, and then my suggestion, I'm sure you have worked with different ones or your own versions, and the main thing is to come up with something that is good for you as a school, something that really works for you as a school, you can work with. So what I'm sharing now is the kind of what I call the lens, the way of looking at the child, the things that we talk about. So when we do the child study, we usually, and to make it we try and make it a special event so that we really take it seriously. It's good to make it into like a little ritual in some way. So rather than just sitting and chatting, you really build a procedure where you take it seriously, what you're doing. And one way to do that is to sit in a circle. You can do around the desk, but it's nice to sit in a circle. And often, to give it a sense of being a little bit special, you light a candle. And it can be good to start with a little verse to, in a sense, put a little boundary around it. And there are various verses you can use. The one that I'm familiar with is a really simple one. It's just a simple statement saying, we've come today to meet to talk about this child, the name of the child, and we ask the spiritual world, we ask for some guidance in understanding this child, so that this child's issue, this child's secret, the riddle of this child will be revealed to us. So you, in a sense, open yourself a little bit to some higher thoughts. And then the child study is always led by the child's teacher. But this is important, that the child's teacher, the one who sees the child the most, should lead the study. So they're the ones on a daily basis responsible for the the child. And then they present an overview of the child. They present their observations of the child. And then anyone else who teaches the child can contribute to that. And the idea is that together, spoken into this group, that together everyone starts to build an inner picture of the child. This is the important thing, that those who are doing the study inside themselves start to build an inner picture. Just like the teacher does, what the individual teacher does at night time in their own private study of each of the children in their class. And because the teacher carries all that information, he or she can put that together fairly easily. Now you have to have a common way of sharing the knowledge. And so the main teacher leads the sharing. And what the teacher does is go through what I call the different layers of the child's being in describing the child, so that everyone in the circle can actually start to build that picture. Now, what do they share? Well, we go through a series of steps looking at what we call the different bodies of the child. Now, first one is even just building the physical body. So, very simply, and just in a short time, giving a sketch of what the child looks like. Key features: tall, short, thin, larger, face, anything significant. And even going through just even different aspects of the face, the nose, ears, briefly what the teacher has seen of the child, observed. She just generally, and the main aim of all of this, the description, is there is no judgment. There must be no judgment. Nothing like they're good or they're not good, or it's pretty or it's not pretty. It's nothing. It's got to be quite objective. That's the whole aim. So it's got to be. So this is the key one: no judgment. So the first one is the physical shape. Now, in one sense, this is the easiest bit because it's there and you can see it. Right? You can see the child. You can describe it. Hair, body structure, shape, limbs, physically, and you give a little description. The second one deals with what in Steiner's way of working in anthroposophy, we call, in a sense, the body that lies behind the physical body. Now, we obviously, our physical body is what we see, and I see all of your physical bodies, and you see mine. But there is something in us that, in a sense, animates us and gives us life. It's the bit that makes us alive. And this is really like another body. It's the body that keeps us alive. And if you're with anyone when they pass away, there's that moment at the point of death where they breathe their last and something leaves them, and all you see is the physical body. During life, you're seeing the physical body and their life body. I think in your traditions it's called nyawa. The samangat, right? Yeah. So there is, you understand what I mean, there is something in addition. Now this life, we call it various names, but we can call it the life body. So the life body manifests, you can't really see it, you can only see it indirectly. And the life body manifests most in the way someone moves. The way you move, the habits, it's a very subtle body. And so it's good, and also can be stronger or weaker. Some people are full of life, some people are not so full of life. And so you try to mention that this life body within the teacher's observations. Now this really touches also on call the temperament. And the temperament is, of course, I mentioned this last week in the training course. The temperament is this subtle part of us about how we relate to the outside world. And there are these 4 temperaments that we each have an influence from. But I'll come back to this because it affects each of these. Now, in a sense, the life body is, we call it the nyawa. This is really, in a sense, something that lives behind the physical body. It's almost like another body. And if you know child development things, you know it's born at a later stage. Now then there is what we call, again we have different words for it, but it's what we could call more our emotional body, our feeling body. Starting to call it the astral body, which is a little bit difficult to explain, but you could almost call it the emotional body. And this is where you describe a little bit about the child's emotional life. Are they very fiery? Are they very reactive? How they are emotionally. Their relationships with other people. So the teacher gives a little overview of the child's emotional life, as much as they have been able to see. And sometimes the reason for doing the child study is because there's been some issue in the child's relationships or their emotional development. So often this is quite important. And then the last one is, this is possibly the hardest, is especially for younger children, and this is the child's own, what we call their own I, their own inner self. Like and it's hard to separate out with younger children because it's so embedded in all the other bodies. You could call it the I, their sense of who they are, their ego. But I mean it in the big sense, with capital E. The I. And with older children, certainly with teenagers, it becomes a little bit more apparent, and you can touch on it in terms of their destiny, their life challenges, who they are as a person, what they're striving for. Now, each of these in turn have, in a sense, I always think of them as surrounding the child. And the child study, the aim of this is to really share all of these different perspectives. The key issue is always no judgment. Now, so this is the first step in the child study. The teacher shares their perspective on all of these aspects of the child. And obviously, this could go on, and it's best to keep it no more than 20 minutes max. And the teacher presents, and then other people who teach the child contribute, and they add to it. So you have a session where you are really studying the child. That's why it's called that. You are studying the child. What are the qualities of all of these different bodies of the child? All these different things. And this is where you come to the temperament, is the temperament is actually a combination, in one sense, of all these things and how they relate to the world. Some people are very fiery, they're like fire, the cholerics. Some are very earthy, like the melancholics, and they're very sad by the difficulties of life. The sanguines their emotional life is often very external, and the phlegmatics are sort of more kind of their life, they're very comfortable with their life and they're very self-contained. But we're all a little bit of a combination of all of them. We have a little bit of a combination. Now, so this is the first step, is just really sharing this. And everyone tries to build a common picture. And the aim of it is that at the end of that 20 minutes or so, everyone who's in the room has been able to make an inner picture. I've got a picture in my mind of this child. And I'm focusing on it. And so for that time, we all focused on that child. Our thoughts, our collective thoughts, were on that child. Now usually, the teacher brings a child study because there is a problem, or something's not working, or they're very difficult in class, and you can't work out what's going on. So often, all this information, it's good to avoid looking at the issue, the problem, just yet. You're trying to gather all the information. So you're doing a study. You're studying all of those things. And then, when you've studied all of that, you might come at the end to the problem. But the important thing is you don't try and solve the problem. Now this is the quite wonderful thing of child study, is you try to avoid the actual problem. You just think about the child. And then, but this is only step one. And then what we're going to do is, just as I talked about in your own study of each individual child, you go up into the night, then you come down, and then you go back up into the night. You do the same thing with this child study, the collective one. And usually what people do is, you leave it for a week. So step one is step one is sharing the picture of the child. Sharing the picture. So share the picture on that first step. So that's week one. Now, there has been a question of how long you should make the child study run for, and it should go for at least 1 week. And so this is week one, sharing the picture. And ideally, at the end of that first week, you take that picture with you, and all the people in the room carry that picture with them, and they go off and they try not to, in a sense, solve the problem just yet. You just want that picture to live in your mind. And you all take it up into your unconscious, into the night, and you live with it in the night. You hold it up there. And over the next week, you, in a sense, every now and again, you think of the child. Often people who are teaching the child will then try and find an opportunity to observe the child in the playground. So they'll go and find where the child is in the playground just to observe, see how they're going. Is anything, I notice anything? And you let it rest, and you come back week 2, 1 week later, and now, having been through all of this, you review what you did. You review that. And you've had a week of everyone thinking about it at night time. So it matures, it starts to, it's like it's a marinade. You know, when you marinate, you put something in cooking, you allow that rich picture to, in a sense, start to come to some understanding. And this week 2, you come back and you review, and most importantly, you review, and people then share, and very often, so in most child studies I've been in that after that week, when people come back and review, someone will have got some idea. Something will have happened. You will have seen something. There may have been a slight improvement in the child, or there may not. But the main thing is you start to bring it together, and it's a bit like the review in the main lesson. Each morning you review from the day before. It starts to become real for everyone there. Now you can do your main lesson, you can do your child study. If time is possible, the best is to go a 3rd week. So it's over a 2-week period. First day, 1 week, second day. So the 3rd week, you then bring it to some completion. And you put all that together, and this is where you can start to talk about what you're going to do about the child. start to talk about what can be done. Some what I call resolution. Not revolution, resolution. So some resolution. So you've started with an issue, a problem. Very important this first week to, in a sense, not talk about the problem. Unless it's part of the picture. Sometimes it's part of the picture and you have to. But it can be good not to try and see. It's very important you don't solve the problem that first week. You leave it open. And this is the process. You leave it open. The second week you review and you're starting to focus a bit on the resolution. But it's the third week that you allow it to really, you start to think about what can we do. If the child's acting very difficult, if they're playing up in class, not listening to you, then you start to come up with solutions. Excuse me, but only after you've done these 2 weeks of holding the picture open. Now, this is the important thing, that you leave it open for those 2 weeks. Because this allows, remember we talked about the creative ideas coming down out of your unconscious? The same thing, the creative ideas come down. And it's in that third session that the creative ideas start to happen. And someone will say, gosh, what about, I haven't thought of this before, but what about if we do this? Or how about if this child should do something that would help them? And the creative ideas, hello?
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well.
And who are you?
Come on in. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I've sort of talked my hand. Hi, I'm Andrew. Hello.
I'm
The creative ideas come down. Now this is it's a real manifestation of thoughts working together. The power of collective and creative thoughts that are brought down. But the important thing is you don't go into it with a fixed idea. You go into it with an openness and a real desire to study the child. Thank you. A real desire to study the child. And then if you leave that open, and it's a little bit like that in life generally, I'm sure you've all had this issue where you have a problem in life, you don't know what the answer is, and sometimes you just have to say, I don't know what the answer is. I will just wait and trust and focus, and then if you are patient, an answer starts to come to you. Now there's a lot of faith involved in that and trust, but it can work. Now it doesn't mean you don't do the work, you have to do the work. And this is the whole point about the child study. There's a lot of work goes into that. But it's about understanding each of the children in our care. Now I could tell you lots of stories about times this has worked. I could also though tell you stories when it hasn't worked and there's still been a problem. That doesn't always work. It's not a magic bullet that's going to answer every issue. But I have seen it work. Where there's been a child who's been difficult, and just the power of people collectively with loving thoughts focusing on that child, it started to have an impact, and the child, either something has changed in the environment or something changes in the child. But the key thing is that the group of people carry that together, sharing, review, resolution, working through, and then building this larger picture of what the child is. So that's the broad way. Now, many different schools do it slightly differently. And there are you can find checklists of all the different things you need to have looking at the child. I find too much, you can get too much information. It's more what will be enough to help each person carry the child in their own thought life. And then that real commitment to helping solve the problem and working together, the power of that collective thought. And this is one of the key aspects of a Waldorf school, is the power of our thoughts is part of the life of the school and part of our education. So that's one perspective on child study. So, keen to hear your thoughts and your way of doing it and what you've done. Yes, Jan?
Question. Who are the teachers that normally, two questions really.
Yeah.
Who starting the child, because some teachers they think to invite parents.
Parents?
Some have this idea of inviting parents. And second, some main class teachers, they said, let's invite teachers from other classes. But then I know not all teachers teach their child. So if they're not teaching their child, it's not
Yeah, sure.
okay, right?
That's good.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Very critical issue around parents. My experience is not to have parents for the simple reason that parents find it almost impossible to be non-judgmental or objective. It's the nature of being a parent. We can't. We're part of them. So very importantly, in my view, is not parents. And now that raises other issues. And that raises issues of whether you should tell parents you're doing a child study. Because some parents can get quite offended that you're talking about their child. Now, the reality is in any school, you will talk about children. So that's normal. But parents don't think of it, don't realise that. And they can say, why are you talking about, you haven't asked me, But by virtue of them enrolling the child in the school, then in one sense, that's part of the contract with the school. So it's a very subtle question, how you do that. And whether you even tell the parent that you're doing it, or is it just part of your regular faculty work together? So that's the question that you have to address as a faculty. Now the other question is around the other teachers. Generally, because classes that are close in age, say if the child's in class 2, and in the playground the class 1 teacher will have something to do with them, the class 3 teacher, usually I think it's actually good if other teachers are there. So it's not just, so if you, for example, if it's a class 2 child, you would have the main lesson teacher, you'd have the language teachers, you might have the guard, if you've got other teachers anyone who teaches that child should be there. Plus also the other maybe adjoining main lesson teachers if they have a bit to do, if you're in the same playground and they know them. The main thing is though not to have too many, because then it becomes too loose. It's, a good number is, in my view, is around 5, 6, between 5 and 8. It's good. I mean, you can do a child study with even 2. That's minimum. You can do it with 2. The main thing is it's at least, it's more than you. So it could be 2 people, but obviously power of numbers, bigger, the bigger the party, the more fun, like it's, so around that, but certainly no more, never more than 8 max. But anywhere between 2 and 8, depending on that, would be my thoughts. So, because people have some normal interaction with the child, and teachers as well. So, not office staff, but the teachers, because you have that pedagogical approach to the child. Yeah.
But what are your viewpoints on the same tone as parents' view that we encourage, or rather maybe new lesson teachers, and actually ask for some of the observations that we had, as a child at home, or maybe the parents, as much as they're biased, to some extent, they could be able to offer some.
I understand that. Yeah, that's very true. That's absolutely right. But I would just say, really, you're also looking at the child at school and how they present to the outside world. And obviously, part of the main lesson teacher's presentation could include things that the parents have told her. The parents say that at home the child is, and so on. And I think that would be the way to present it. It's just that it's just the nature of being. I mean, I'm trying to imagine my own children in child study, and I just know I couldn't do it, because I'm immediately thinking of all the other things of the child. So I'm just putting myself in that position, and that's the reason. And it's nothing. It's not discriminatory. We're not discriminating against the parent, but it's more the power of this is and it's really this no judgment and no. And I mean, the nature of being a parent is you love your child unconditionally, right? So that's the nature of it. But professionally, we need to be able to make objective observations of it, and that's why I say the parents not be in it. And
Because I've
probably,
had
yeah,
situations where actually the child, for example, the observation of the parents are home, the child's always tiptoeing at home, for example. He doesn't walk properly.
yeah,
But when it comes to school or it comes to where he's in society, he walks firmly. So it could be something that we may
Yeah,
not,
sure.
we don't
Well,
hear
normally-
it at home.
but see, normally that should be part of what the teacher, that's one of the reasons why sometimes teachers do home visits.
Yeah.
They go there to observe, and then that's very unusual to have the child tiptoeing at home but walk. It's usually the other way around, from my own experience. But that would be something either the teacher's seen or you've heard from the parent, and then you would bring it to the child's study, and then it would be part of that picture building. But if it's something like that, I can assure you, like you said, there would be other manifestations of that same thing that you would see at school.
Yeah. Just in a different form.
Yeah, in different form, exactly right, yeah. But you'd see it, and it's putting all of those things together. That's why, as I say, it's like a riddle, like what does this tell us about the child? And what does the child need to do? Does the child need to, if it's like that, does the child need to do more hopping or jumping or something, to get more into their legs? And so that's where sometimes, you see, and what you get then, we'll just take this example. If there was a child who was somehow not properly getting into their legs, that the children walk on their toes, there are children like that, and obviously it's something about they need to get into their legs. Now, you might think, gosh, that child needs to do that. Now, as a teacher, you're not a therapist, so I'm not going to have a therapy for that child. This is actually the very important next question. What do you do with this information? If you say, for example, the child needs to be more in its legs, what I would then do is in morning circle, I would have everyone doing perhaps maybe more jumping or stepping, or I do the whole class doing it, and that way that child benefits. Now the other side, of course, not every child needs that, but every child will benefit from getting into their legs. So a little bit every morning is going to benefit that child, but they're all going to be benefited from. So there are things that come out of this, and this is the important thing, is we're not individual therapists. You see, so that's however, you might think if the child, for example, if it's a handwriting issue, there may be some development in the child's fine motor that has either gone wrong because of a physical problem, or say they came to school in class 3 and missed out all the fine motor work we do in class 1. Now, then it may be such that you can't actually address it in the class. So you might recommend that they go to an occupational therapist, someone who works with their fine motor. And that might be a suggestion you say to the parent, look, have you thought about having the child assessed by an occupational therapist? And that might be a path to go down. So that's something that might come out of a resolution of this. So then you take it back to the parent as a suggestion. So it's either an individual therapy that would help them, or something that the whole class would do. And so sometimes I've felt, I had a couple of children who really needed to get into their hands more, and we need to do a little bit of woodwork. So I brought in just a little woodwork project for the whole class. Now everyone benefits from that in a small way, but it was specifically addressing the needs of 1 or 2 children who needed that. And it came out of thinking about this deeper need that those individual children had. So, any questions here? Other thoughts? How do you do it? Going to get some questions here. What's your question?
One more question.
Yeah.
Is the biography of the child important here?
Yes, very good point. Actually, I'm sorry, that's something I've left out. That's this part here, the biography of the child. Yeah. Sorry, that's. Thanks for raising that. That's where this comes in. So, for example, the class teacher might say, just for example, so simple things, right? The child was actually, say, born in Kuantan. They spent 2 years in the country, and when the child was 3, they moved to Kuala Lumpur, and they've been living here. And it might be that the child's been at 5 different houses in its first 6 years. Now that could be very significant because a child may have not developed a certain sense of continuity or being in place. And that's what manifests through this, their inner destiny. So I'm sorry, I didn't use that word, but thank you. Yeah. So it's their so just a brief outline of the family, of like, you know, where they are in the family. They're the first child, second child, third child. You know, what are the families doing, where they are, and a little bit of that personal history. Very important because that puts the overall context of their life and how their life is fitting together. All right, any other questions?
Do the sharing is only once a week. After that, we do the group observation.
Yes,
and
yes.
For the rest.
Yes, now good question. So I've found it's good just to do only do one at a time, because all of us, we need to focus on one thing. So my experience is it's good if as a faculty, your weekly faculty meeting, if you can fit this in, that every week you do one study. Now you can either do it as in a sense over 3 weeks, and you do, you know, week 1 you do the child, week 2 you do the review, week 3 resolution, week 4 you start a new one. Now that's nice and focused. Sometimes though, you have lots of problems. You might need to, in week 3 you might finish one and then start another one. Right? So that I have known that to happen. But it's good if you can focus just on the one. But of course that means in a term, in one term you might only do 3 children. And if you've got 60, 100 children in your primary school, that's only 3 in a term, that's only 12 in a year. So there's not many, it's only 10%. And that leads to the problem of, every child can benefit from this. Because every child, we need to know each other deeply. We need to know our children as deeply as possible. So there is some people, I know some schools that really speed it up and only do 2 weeks on this, just so they can do more children. And that's just something you as a school have to work out. What's your priority? You know, is it the fast food version, or is it going to be the slow food version? And there are benefits of both. So it really depends on the need. I know it's sometimes said that it would be nice for every child to be the subject of a child's study, say at least once a year or so, just so that we all, even the so-called good children, who don't get into trouble and aren't causing problems, everyone deserves to be known better. So it would be wonderful if everyone was observed and we got to know. It's like it's that powerful thing when you hear someone's biography and their story, you feel a stronger connection with them because you know that story. And so that's great. The more we can do this, the better. But time is limited, so you just have to work with what is possible within your own faculty and your own school. Question?
Sometimes the creativity is not from us, it's from the higher world. Do we express gratitude or even blessing?
Yeah, that's very nice. It's a lovely, exactly what I mentioned. The starting point is that sense of the child presents us with a riddle, and also something exactly that, a gratitude this child has been brought to us. And so we should have that. And certainly at the end, as you finish, it's good to express and even just to try and have some feeling of gratitude that you have received some creative ideas and some thoughts that, and we didn't make them up, we were given them. So it's very important to have a feeling somehow of gratitude at the end. Yeah. Do you have a question?
How about the age of the child that we study?
Yeah, that's right. Good question. You can do this at any age. Obviously, the older, probably the very young. I wouldn't do so much the very young ones, like kindergarten, but once they're in class 1, then certainly if there are issues, then you can do it. Obviously, if they're a little bit older, they have more biography and we know them better. So, beginning of class 1, possibly not so good to do. Wait till they're a little bit older. But from class 2 on, absolutely, that's any age you can do that. And most interesting, the younger the child, in one sense, it's an interesting thing, they tend to be more, the nature of the younger child, they're less fixed, and they tend to be more open to some of these influences from those ideas as they get older. Question?
So how long do you?
Oh, I'm sorry, you got another. You want to go ahead?
Yes, Andrew, for the process, 3 weeks process, right? First
Yeah.
week we share the teacher
Yeah.
among all the subject teachers.
Yeah, the people who are there, yeah.
Yes, and then the second week when we are doing the review, we still have that picture every night we have to do.
The every night is what I think a main lesson teacher should do with their individual children. That may have been mixed up. That's something that I think every main lesson teacher should do as part of their daily work. Right? Now, for the people doing the child study, that's not so essential. If they do it, it's great, because it just adds that nightly work on it. But it can be a burden because it's an extra thing. But if the people who are subject teachers take that on, and if they did that every night, that would just add an extra strength to the thoughts that they have. So yeah, so it could be done. If it's possible, yes. Okay, that's a question. Yeah.
How much time do you spend on each activity?
Oh yeah, good question. No more than, one of the main things of this is it's very easy to go on. And once you get chit-chatting and talking about things, and it's very easy to get them. That's why it's very good to have someone who chairs the meeting. Either the main lesson teacher, or if you have a faculty chair, or one person who chairs the meeting. Because it's so easy, our thoughts just go everywhere. And the aim of this is to be focused thought. So I would say no more than 20 minutes for each one. And you need a timekeeper. And you need someone to focus the thought. And it always comes up, I found it all the time. And there are two things. And the chair has 2 roles. One is not just timekeeping, but it's also focusing the conversation. Because the classic thing, it's like the thoughts when we have with a child. As I said, if I think of any child that I've taught, I start to think of them, when I'm teaching, and then I gave this example before. I would always find it. Oh, I'm thinking of Mia. Oh, she left her sand shoes in the locker. I've got to call the mum to get the sand shoes. Now, the mum is the class parent, and she's arranging the picnic next Sunday. I've got to talk about the picnic. Oh, and by the way, my esky that I'm going to take is broken. I've got to go and get a new little refrigerator. And that means I didn't check the switch on the power thing in the fridge. And you know our thoughts go like that? So I start off here with her, and I end up fixing the switch on the fridge. So all of those different things. So you've got to have it, and we do that in our own mind, and we do it all the time in our talk. Someone said, I say, oh, he's a lovely boy, he's a lovely girl. Oh, you remember about, and everyone's chatting. Now you need a chair who says, come, stop, you just went through the gate, come back in. No, we're not going to talk about that. And you focus, so you keep it to the 20 minutes. Otherwise, you waste your time. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. It could be down at the cafe having a nice time. You've got to focus on why it works when it's the power of attention. It's the power of a focused thought. This is attention. This is the first of Steiner's 6 exercises. I'm serious. Control of thought. If you can control your thoughts, everything else follows. All right. So how are we going for time?
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
What's the time?
20 minutes.
Oh, we're going to 5, are we? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, 5. Yeah. Question, yeah.
Will you revisit, like re-study the child again?
Again, the second
For
time?
second time, it means maybe there are very big issues again and again, or...
Oh, yeah, okay, good question. Well, my thought on that one is, if you do all this with a child, and sometimes issues can't be fixed. And sometimes we just have to accept that. Sometimes issues can't be fixed, and then you may have to look at some other solution. So my thought is it's best to do this as best you can over those 3 weeks and then leave it. And if it still goes on, come back to it maybe the next term, like 2 or 3 months later. Don't do it immediately. Because when you review it the next term, you know, in a child's life, 3 months, a lot can happen. And things may have changed in a way you hadn't been aware of. So my thought is leave a bit of space before you come back to it. Now if it's something that has, like if the child is continually disrupting the classroom, for example, then you have to come up with a more immediate solution. And that's a bigger question for the school, which may have to do with taking the child out of the class, having some other arrangement, because ultimately your focus as a classroom teacher and as a school is on the whole class. And so sometimes, and this is one of the, you know, every method has its negative. Sometimes we focus so much on individuals. I have known some main lesson teachers to so focus on fixing the problem of one child that they ignore the rest of the class. And then if that happens, you can find that the children who aren't having problems can leave, because the class is dominated by the teacher determined to fix the problem of the difficult child. And so that's why you have to get a balance between those two things. So you've got to look at what is the healthy classroom and how can I help the child who is having issues in that healthy classroom, how can I help them be part of that classroom. But then you have to look at all the other options that you've got, because your focus always is delivering the lessons and ensuring that the class as a whole is really functioning well. And that's your key priority. Question, Janet?
It's not a question, maybe just a small sharing.
Please, yeah, keen to have sharing. No, that's exactly right.
I didn't host the child study, but I attended the child study by 2 different groups of teachers. But I find, maybe this is my preference, maybe you all can try it out, because I find that with this teacher who put more reverence into the whole situation, how the atmosphere, she even lighted a candle. I do not know.
Sorry, but
She even lighted a candle.
She lit the candle?
Yes, she lit the candle. And then she, you know, it was full of reverence where, you know, like you said, you know, you have a control of thoughts and you only say what's essential.
Essential, yeah.
You don't say when you have nothing to say and what you say matter.
Yep.
So I found the whole process, even though it was short, it was a bit like a contemplative mood.
Yes.
You are thinking and then
Yep.
you say what's essential and then you leave. You just need a half an hour listen to it.
Yep.
Compared to another one, they did do quite a good job, but a little bit less relevance. So I simply prefer this one much better than the other one.
I totally agree, and you tend to find those ones are more effective. See, it's our different thoughts. Our ordinary thoughts, in a sense, are a little bit, they're a bit dead. You know, all those thoughts of statues, the picnic, they're kind of dead thoughts. You know that chapter you may have done in the Foundation of Study of Man, of those, where he talks about our thoughts come from, they're kind of dead. And that's the one level. When we put will into our thinking, that's when we turn our thinking becomes more alive. And they're the thoughts that have an effect, is more alive thinking. So it's the thoughts where your will has gone into it. So if you think of, my thoughts all full. If I take this off. Did you come in? Would you like to do it? She's my Pambuntu last week. She was very good. She did it much better than I can do it. So it enables me to talk, so she's going to do it. Thank you, Sue. So it's to do with, we have our thoughts up here and our will comes from in our limbs. Those two. And we're a polarity. We have these two sides to us. And this is this extraordinary picture that Rudolf Steiner suggested, that our thoughts fundamentally are a bit dead. You know, the brain is the most lifeless part of us. Our brain doesn't have any life really in it. It's our nerve system, whereas our blood and our will, that's where our life is. And it's this polarity, you know, that's why if you damage brain cells, they don't regrow. You know, whereas so many other parts of the body, if you damage it, it regrows because it's got life in it. But our thought life doesn't. And that's our whole problem, is that so much of our modern world is based on this thought life. But all the spiritual traditions, it's all of them, every single spiritual tradition has in it, in some form or other, that's perfect, thank you, Sue, that's just beautiful, has in it the thought that when you focus and concentrate, you lift your thoughts to another level. And that higher level is where the creative thoughts live. But it requires will. You don't just, if you just sit and think, they won't get there. But you have to will it. And that's what when you concentrate, you're putting will, your living part, into your dead part. And you give it extra power. So it's this contrast between thinking on the one hand and willing on the other. And if we can bring this up into here, we actually bring this alive. Now we have, of course, in between, we have a feeling. And if we can bring our feeling into our thinking as well, double whammy, even better, even more potent and powerful. And then our thoughts are really alive, living thoughts. And then that's when they go at us. They go up. And that's when they can they actually then have an effect down in the material world. And as I said, every spiritual tradition, in some form or other, has that idea. And so Steiner was just packaging this in a kind of contemporary form for us to be able to use in education. So that's why the focused attention, that's why I said you need someone to chair the meeting, to make sure there isn't all of that, the chit-chat, and you only say something if you have something to say. So then the words are actually very more powerful, and that they have more effect. So creating that sense of reverence and gratitude afterwards, just it creates a whole new way of understanding children and of course people as well. All right, questions? More questions? Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I can ask this. How about class studies?
Class study, that's a good point. You go, yeah, class studies, yeah, they're good to do. Class studies good to do, but they're very, they're just hard because you've got so many children in it. And there are different, I mean, you could follow the same class study. So what we're being asked about is, do you do a class study? So that's if you're having problems with a whole class, for example, yeah. Now sometimes, well, no, actually not always problems, but if, often you do it as it's nice to review a class at a certain point. For example, at the end of class 2 is often good to do a review before they move into class 3, or something like the end of class 4. Often the end of a stage, 2-year stage, it might be good just to review the class. And the teacher would then take everyone through fairly quickly, each of the children, just a picture of the dynamics, what's going on. And it's very helpful as well at the start of each year if you have new staff coming in. So if you have a new language teacher or a new someone, it's good to do that, and that they sit and they hear, and they gives them a picture of the whole class. That's really helpful. But it's slightly different because you're not as focused on the individual. You're focused on a whole thing, but can be very powerful in the right setting. Okay. More questions? Can I ask, how do your schools do child study? Do you do anything? No?
I did it before during my kindy time, for my kindy child.
Yeah.
5 of the teachers were holding the hand, and then one of the teacher will ask me to describe the children.
and the condition in the class. So just take about a few minutes to think about the child. But I'm not sure whether we can relate with the parents' problem.
You mean tell the parents or?
Most of the time when the parents facing the problems, the kids will be having problem in school.
Yeah.
So are we only focus on the child or the child behavior, or can we relate with the child parents?
Oh, I see. If there's an issue at home.
An issue at school and
At home. Really, it should be. Well, look, it's generally it's a pedagogical study, so it's the child in school. But obviously, usually there's some connection. If there's some issue at school, there's usually something at home. It's rare for the child to be just perfect at home and difficult at school. It does happen. And so I'd probably, and with the younger child, it's, look, any time that you work together, and you know, this, what I've suggested is that's more a procedure, but you can work in the principle of just teachers working together, thinking about a child. You can do that in a sense any time, you know, because it's all going to help. It's you know, there's never too much of it. So if you were just what you were saying, that you're just thinking about sharing with the child and then focusing on the child, that is going to help. Now the question is really whether though it's a school issue or a parent issue. And so the younger child, it's obviously going to be home and school are very much linked. And I don't have so much experience with the very younger child, so I wouldn't like to really comment on it. I'm more used to the, you know, once they're in school. So work that one out. Just work out what is best for yourself. Your own creative solution. Joking. Yeah.
This probably not happen in every class because I am my girl's class teacher.
Oh gosh. Don't do your own child study.
So no chance for her kids.
No. It'd be a bit hard. I mean, look, that's highly unusual here. Yeah, that's very unusual. I mean, it does happen, and it happens in Australia occasionally. You know, but it's not. You know, it can be a challenge because the child the child needs a separation. You know, and you need separation too sometimes. So that's the hard part. So that's a question for. Well, let's hope they don't have any problems. You know?
So for the class, because I took over the class when my girl was in grade 3,
Yeah.
and moving forward to grade 4.
Yeah.
And there are problems. There are some emotional
Sure.
happening in my girl.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, me myself. So, what is your advice? Advice or
I want to do that. What's that emoji on the phone? You know, with the. So I honestly don't know.
It's like just now you were saying that the parents would have been very difficult to have contact.
That's right. That's why.
No judgment things.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm just thinking immediately about it. What I'd probably do is ask if you could bear it, even arrange, just so if you wanted to do a child study, have a trusted colleague, one other teacher, present, but you don't say anything. So you would have to call it tahan, you know. So let them present, and then without you trying to get too involved, because it will just bring out all your emotions. So, you know, it's obvious. That's why, as I've suggested, it's better not to have parents in there, because you simply can't separate. It's the nature of being a parent. So that's all I can say. Perhaps if you could trust your colleagues to do it, and then try not to be involved. But still focus your thoughts. So that way you would almost force yourself not to say anything, and force yourself just to be as objective as you could. And then, but the thoughts could then still have an effect. Yeah, that's the best I can do. Yeah.
Yeah, like for saying, sorry, I missed your question. At first, her daughter is in the same class with her. What about, does there any effect on the separation part? Like when we say the 9-year change, they need to separate from the parents, but for her kids, even after the 9 years change, she still have to stick with the main teacher mothers. Yeah, so is there any?
Well, look, all I say is life is full of exceptions.
It is actually, I don't know what is happening inside my girl.
Yeah,
But
sure.
apparently it's okay. But
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what is inside here.
Yeah, but that's that's what I mean. You're being the mum with it, but it's sometimes it's like in some ways it's every situation. Life is so complicated, and it may be the destiny that you found yourself in, and you'll work through it. And but the key thing would be to try and allow her that separate space. That's the big thing even with teenagers. We've got to allow them their space. It's like those simple things like you don't just open the door of their room, you knock first. So you give them that respect. So it would be if you can allow her to have her own space and her own emotions, and then in one sense, so long as everything's going all right, not crying too much, allowing her to have that inner separation. And then if you can work with that, then that will be good for both of you. Yeah? Okay, good luck. I'm sure it will work out. All right, other questions? How are we going for time?
3 more minutes.
3. Oh, lots of questions. Let's go. How many can we fit in 3 minutes? Any more? We're about done? 3 minutes? Do you think you got your full value from the session? All right. Right, everyone. Well, look, as I said, these are suggestions, but again, it's a procedure. But the main thing is what is the essential, and the essential is that we do it objectively, that we work together, and that we have focused on the child. We really gather the information, and we work with what can come to us. It can be very exciting because this makes life interesting. There's always creative solutions to life's problems. And this is what I always found so fantastic about Rudolf Steiner's methods. It gives you more options, more creative options to living life, and makes life more interesting and more rich. You never quite know what's coming, and you can work on new solutions. But within a very nice blend of traditional and future-oriented frameworks. So I wish you well. So good luck with all of your child studies. All right, so we'll leave it there. Thank you.